welcome to our first live event of Echoes on Air. We've got an awesome live audience. You guys don't have to be like super quiet. Y'all can actually like make noise so people know that we're not making this up. There really are other people here. So we're super excited for our first live event. Before we get started though, I just want to take a minute to remind you that we are recording. We are also live streaming because apparently we are good like that. Can you raise the... Dang, maybe we should stop. Okay, but the point is, we're excited, right? So, but take a moment to silence anything that buzzes, beeps, chirps, or sings, because we are recording and everything, and we'll kind of go ahead and get started. I guess I should tell you who I am for those who don't know. Hi, I am Janelle Gray. I am the host and founder of Echoes Media. Thanks. And this is Echoes on Air, which is a subsidiary of Echoes Media, which is our podcast. And Chris is our co-host.
Hi.
You can tell where our people are too, like, right?
Right. Like based on who yells in the room, you can tell. I'm Chris. But before I introduce myself, I know that we've all heard about the tragedy that happened in Christchurch in Australia, or New Zealand. I apologize. And I just wanted to, before we get into all this, talking about social justice, burnout, and trauma, in fact, I just want to take a moment and kind of hold space for that, to lift up the victims and the survivors there, and also our Muslim brothers and sisters worldwide. So just if you join me in a moment of silence. All right. So thank you for that. So I just wanted to introduce myself. Hi, my name's Chris, and I am the co-host of the Echoes on Air podcast. I tell people that I write, act, sing, direct, anything creative you can think of, but instead of doing that, I get paid to help other people do it. And I'm also fortunate enough to be asked by Janelle to join the Echoes Media team. So I've been the co-host of the podcast since the beginning of this year. And thank you all so much for coming. I think we're going to have a really, really great discussion around social justice, around burnout, around trauma, around how we take care of our mental health as we fight all these fights that I think Echoes Media really is about fighting. And I want to thank our wonderful panelists.
Yes.
Give them a hand for the experience and the knowledge in the room.
Yes.
But if you guys would like to introduce yourself, whoever wants to go first,
Guess that's me. Okay. Hi there. My name is Anna Kim, and I like to tell people I'm a trauma-informed family therapist, which just means I treat the whole family. So some of my clients are as young as 5 in their families, all the way up to 67, and I treat anything in between. So relationship to themselves, parent-child relationship, couples relationship, and also relationship with substances as well, so substance abuse as well. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. This is so exciting.
Thanks
and
for being here.
Even as I was driving over here, I was thinking, wow, this is so necessary in this time, in this culture of everything what we're going through, what's just happened. And so I'm really, really honored to be here and to be able to speak on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know why. Hey, y'all. So my name is Brittany Gray. I'm an LPCI, and I counsel in Arlington at a private practice called Epiphany Counseling Services. And I also do research at the Center for Brain Health. And so I research adolescent brains. And what else? Is that all? Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm excited too, for obvious reasons. This is my sister, Janelle. But just so proud of this and so happy to be a part of this discussion. So,
Thank you.
don't do that. I know.
She knows I cry at everything, so like you can just look at me wrong, and I'll be like,
won't
"Oh my
look.
God, that's so sweet." so like, she did that on purpose.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Owen, and I am a therapist in private practice. I've been working for about 28 years in the industry. And most recently, I guess in the last 5 years, I've been doing a lot of work with Brene Brown, and I'm a certified Daring Way facilitator. And so we do a lot of focus on vulnerability, shame, authenticity. And so I'm really excited to talk about this today, how it relates to working in social justice. So thank you.
She destroyed me in 5 seconds.
Oh,
5 seconds.
y'all, I want y'all to know, Janelle's over here so moved right now. Oh, it's beautiful. That's family. Listen.
Right.
So first, I think the first thing is just to highlight, I think this is going to be an obvious question, but why is the topic so important, specifically with mental health? And anybody can go for that.
Because we just need to talk about it more. I mean, it's so important because trauma is something that we all experience, whether it's a big trauma like a distressing event like a school shooting or like 9/11, or whether it's a small trauma like you just transitioned to a different city or state. And so I think the word trauma gets this bad rep, like, oh, trauma, dun, dun, dun. Like it's so big, but it could be a smaller thing too, and just finding a space, okay, talking about it. Why it's so important, because we all experience some sort of trauma, whether it's small or little, and then healing from it as well.
I think one of the things that I thought was really interesting in talking to all of y'all is the use of the word trauma, because I don't know that we necessarily notice that when we see, because it's on social media. It's on social media all the time, and so I don't know that we really recognize it as trauma, as something that we're affecting, or that's affecting us in that way. So can you talk a little bit about that, like what that does?
Sure. I actually have a definition from a trauma specialist. Y'all may be familiar with Vessel van de Korp, and he wrote a really powerful book called The Body Keeps a Score. And he says that trauma is any event that overwhelms the nervous system and changes the way we remember and react to the experience. And so, like Brittany said, it could be something small or it could be something huge. But if it overwhelms our nervous system, when you think of feeling is like an electric current. It's like energy. And so when we have things happen, we will have the external event happens, and we have an internal response called a feeling. And if it's really big, we can't get all of that out. We can't process it. And so that is many times where trauma exists. We can't get it out. And so we have to figure out ways to take care of ourselves, especially if we're on the front lines, working for social justice. But we want to be able to find a way to get that energy and out of our bodies so that we can be more in the present and not be carrying that stuff with us.
So, and I guess I kind of want to talk about, this is going to sound really crazy, but can you diagnose some of the things that we're seeing? So for example, when you look at things that happen in New Zealand, or you look at any of the trauma that we're seeing, can you tell us what you think, and obviously you can't tell us what these people are thinking, but
Right.
where does that kind of come from? Maybe that may present as hate? Is there something that may be underlying?
I definitely think the top layer is hate, but hate is really a secondary emotion, or it's not really even an emotion. It's a reaction. It's usually a behavior. But underneath the vulnerable pieces are going to be fear and not feeling connected. So encourage y'all to add to that.
I would agree, yeah, because so I mean, if you think about why do we feel, it's to either survive, thrive, or avoid danger. And so we have these feelings for reasons. And so if the underlining thing, well, if what you feel is hate, then the underlining would be fear of fill in the blank. And so it's just, as far as counselors go, it's just like, how was this expression mismanaged, like what what led them to then act on an individual in a way that was disruptive to themselves, to other people, as far as like the hate crimes that happened in New Zealand that you were talking about. So I don't know if that answered it.
No, it did. And I also want to encourage those of you in the audience, this isn't just for you to watch us talk either. We would absolutely love if you have a question, or if there is something that they say that you want a little bit more clarification or anything like that. If you want a little bit more information on that, let me know. Jack in the back, the co-producer, AKA the Ghost. If you listen to us regularly, we always call him the Ghost because he never talks. So now you are actually our witness that Jack the Ghost exists. He is
Right.
not a person that we
Right.
make up.
Tell the
on-
listeners he's there.
Tell the world he is a real person. But if you
Post about
have
it on
other questions or anything that you want maybe them to explain, or maybe there's something that we're not answering or we're not asking that you think is important, let us know so we can get the mic to you. Chris, did you have something?
Oh, no, nothing
No,
besides. I'm kidding. I did actually want to speak quickly to, so, our topic today is social justice burnout. And as I was thinking about it, I was sort of thinking about it in two senses, both like the burnout we experience from being people in the world in marginalized identities, in oppressed identities, or just, the thousand little slights that you get being a person of color, being a woman, being a queer person, being a disabled person, being from all these different directions. And so I was hoping you could speak both to that, and then also to, I think, what can maybe be more traumatic as when we're fighting for social justice, when we're constantly exposing ourselves. We especially, I would say, in the last couple of years, it almost felt like to be woke, to be aware, to be interested in social justice meant constantly traumatizing yourself. Literally, like looking at all these videos of Black people being shot, or looking at all these videos of hate crimes, and like you had to be as aware as possible of anything that might traumatize you, and so how do you survive that? How do you protect your mental health? How do you make sure you can still fight? And so I think broadly, we're going to speak to both of those angles of it throughout the session. But yeah, if there's anything in particular that you all can give us tools to, should we keep exposing ourselves to these traumatic things?
Right.
It's such a fine balance between like being engaged, right? Being aware of what's going on, but then also having to find that time to kind of shut off, right? And just be human and kind of go back to like the simpler part of life. And it's such a dance between both of those because we need both, right? And then we're talking about the central nervous system, right? How do we regulate ourselves when we're exposed to the events? What's happening inside my body? Why am I reacting, right? And so I think therapists, if they're trauma informed, they would help you really learn how to, what's the difference between the reaction, which could sometimes be that hate, that righteous anger, right? Because that's the appropriate response to seeing injustice happen in the world. But then also, how am I gonna then respond? And those could be very different things, right? And oftentimes we're in the society of instant gratification, right? We wanna react, or if we want something, we can literally reach it or call someone to get it. I mean, that's just the world that we live in now. And so absolutely, when we're seeing this injustice going on, right, we can't help but have this such strong response to it. And then not even, and on top of that, if you have your own trauma, right? I want to go back to that and how we redefine trauma, because trauma has become so misunderstood and sometimes thrown out a lot. But trauma could be in utero. Trauma can be what was your birth mom's trauma during that time when she was even, had you in her belly. Right? We know from studies that stress hormones from the mom transfers into the child. So you're already set up and born into this world with some kind of experience and trauma, right? Then there's the traumatic event, there's abuse, there's neglect. I mean, there's all those things. But I'm gonna butcher his name. His name is Gabor Mate, right? And he talks about trauma in such a way that I was like, wow, that really makes so much sense. So trauma can be that traumatic event that happened to you. but trauma is also what lives and works within you. And in that way, with that kind of definition, everyone is exposed to trauma in some sort of way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can actually be really subjective. It doesn't have to be this loud, big event. It could actually be little quieter traumas, right? Quieter jabs, whether it's how you internalize things, whether that's false beliefs or messages you received in the world, right? All of that is carried within you. And so really learning, how do I still be engaged? How do I still remain woke and understanding what's going on in this world?
How that works.
But also being able to pull away, because you got to take care of yourself in order to fight the long, good fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there's absolutely burnout in that. Yeah.
Yes.
So what I thought was interesting, and I'm hoping to get a few more statistics actually when I take a pause and grab my phone, but what I did was I was able to poll some of the people I think here in the audience took the survey. We had probably about 80 to 90 people who took the survey, and out of those people who took the survey, it was about 69% that said the first thing they feel is anger. And so I want to know what, we were talking about these underlying things of hate, which I think has a lot to do with, or it shows itself, like that hate shows itself in anger. You can see that in every civil rights movement picture from the 60s, that you see hate being held or, thrown on any of a lot of our different movements that are happening right now. If everybody is feeling that anger first, is that healthy? Is that common? Is there something that they can maybe, or is there something that we can be in tune with that we can kind of pay attention to?
Well, I think that anger is many times a secondary emotion, but it's a powerful emotion and it generates energy. The gift of anger is motivation, strength, and energy. So to go there first makes sense, but if we slow down and if we can understand that anger is most of the time a secondary emotion, if we can slow down and have the mindfulness to say, what else am I feeling in this experience? We may go to the vulnerable feelings of fear, pain, shame, guilt, loneliness, feeling disconnected, or feeling the humiliation or unjust of what's happening.
Go ahead.
I read in this book, and I forget what it's called, but it described that we all have two primary feelings, pain and pleasure. And they describe pain, you could feel that in three ways. So pain in the future was labeled as anxiety, pain in the present was labeled as hurt, and then pain in the past was labeled as anger. And so I think I was like, oh, okay, because if you can go back and uncover some past experiences, I'm sure that anger could be softened by processing what you experienced. And I think a lot of these crimes that we may see that are hate-driven is a past experience that was blocked due to maybe a traumatic experience that led them to still stay in the past.
I low-key want to look back and see if somebody's writing that down. Can somebody write that down? What was that? What was that? That was good.
I'm
can you
going to go back and listen to this episode.
Right. I very rarely listen back, but this is the one. So tell me those again. So pain in the future is anxiety. Pain in the present is hurt, and then pain in the past is anger. And that's how they labeled them.
Yeah, y'all, normally at the end of the episode, we do like a leave and a take, like this is what I'm gonna take away. I'm not gonna be able to do it because I'm gonna take away every third thing that y'all said.
It's gonna be too much. Yeah, so I actually, go ahead, please go. I also wanted to go back to something you were saying, Anna, and I want to ask, so I always preface the statement, if I say something about being Black in America, I always tell people I've been Black all my life, this is all I know. So that's my first thing that I go to is specifically being Black in America, when we talk about people who have these fears, and you were saying how that is something that is passed through a mother, or can be passed through a mother. Can you talk a little bit about that when you're talking about people who are racial minorities or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the biological part, right? Is that we know that we have these stress hormones and we know that we can carry it into our child, right? But at the same time, looking at the circumstance of the mom too. What was her life like? What was she going through, right? What was maybe some of the social injustice that she was experiencing at the time of being pregnant, right? And so that's the biological, but then there's that social component, that context of what was going on. And I think I'm going back to something that you were talking about that kind of came out. So in that way, it's something, there's a word called intergenerational trauma, right? And that can mean so many things depending on who you're talking to. That could be years of history of oppression that your parents experienced, that their parents experienced, right? That's that trauma that not only is biological, but is also very much part of your social and emotional health as well, right? That's what you're kind of bred into, that's what you know. And I can only speak for myself, being that I'm a Korean American, right? My parents, watching my parents be immigrant parents, figuring their way out in America, right? Came with nothing from South Korea. And just watching how that impacted their life and how it impacted mine, right? We don't live in a bubble, we live in a relational world. And I was just thinking too, I just had a thought earlier as we were talking about social justice and kind of like what's our responsibility in all this too. And I think it goes back to having that, yes, collectively we have this responsibility, right, to really be aware, but it also starts with really having that interpersonal connection with yourself too. Because we're going to be triggered, we're going to be traumatized, right? There's secondary trauma that we carry through this. That hurt, that fear is so real. So really making sure that you take the time to really unpack some of that. What does that mean for me? What did that mean for my history? What did that even mean for my mom? Or what is that guilt that we tend to carry through generation because we feel such a responsibility? And so, yeah, it's just so important to really unpack that because we all have our own story and unique stories within that as well. So really making sure we express that.
Something that interesting about, we're all marginalized communities up here, but as a gay man, we are like the only subculture who have parents that are different than us. And so when you were talking about the intergenerational, that's something that we don't experience, but we do experience that feeling of separation and being different. And not being able to go to our family of origin for support. Because many times as we're growing up, we don't even know what it is. We just know that something is different. And I think also going back to the idea of as we're getting ready to do this kind of work, I think it's so important that we know our core values as we're going to get ready to do this kind of work, that we can understand what's the light that we want to hold, that we carry with us as we're going through this work. And I think it's important that we do that individual work, personal work, before we try to go out and make big differences for the other people. If we aren't clear about what our values are, what we're wanting to do in our social justice world, individually or on large scales, we have to know what our own core values are, and then make sure that we're always carrying that light. I use the metaphor of it's in the lantern. It's the light in the lantern. We always want to be walking with that.
Well, how can we do that? How can we, because I really like that idea of part of how you survive is you keep, this is my core value, this is what I want to bring into the world, right? Because before you can bring anything to the world, you got to know what you're trying to bring, right?
Yeah, well, I think that it just takes, some introspection, some mindfulness, sitting down and maybe thinking about, what are the values that I live by? When I can tell you for myself, I did some work with this and started with about 10 core values, and then every day I would kind of look at it and think, okay, I think that one kind of blends into this one and that one kind of blends into this one. But what I ended up with was compassion and courage. Those were my 2 core values that I want to live my life by. And it may be that your values are faith and family. It could be, but to find out what those, and that you have a relationship with that. You're always keeping that right here as you're going through your life in working with people that are in your community and people that are not in your community, but that you're always walking around with your core values and leading the way.
I want to ask a question for, I guess, two sides of this coin. So specifically for Chris, Jack, and I, because we do Echoes on air, we're meeting at least monthly to do something that talks about marginalized communities, that talks about, so we are constantly being, we're constantly facing it. But I want to talk about it from the point of view for the person who is an accountant, you know, that doesn't necessarily do this thing consistently. What are ways that they can get in tune with, like you said, what are those core values? What are things that they can do that still keep them engaged, like you were talking about, but still kind of keep the balance?
I think that one of the quotes you put on here.
I said something smart.
About social change.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
I think that is something, you know, it doesn't take huge things. If you want to
Yeah. Social change is 1 million individual acts of kindness, and 1 million subversive acts of resistance.
Yeah. So it's about, as an accountant, you're at work and you hear someone saying something derogatory, a racially derogatory statement, being able to just say, hey, that's not okay. You know, that learning how to have that courage. Because if you are silent, you side with the oppressor. You don't side with the person that's being marginalized. And so it's always important. There's little, I mean, all through the day, we have little moments where we have those opportunities to be an activist. And when we think, a lot of times when people think of the word activism, we think of a, you know, we're, you know, like this. But really, it's just being authentic and being vulnerable in your world, being courageous in your world, and speaking your truth, making sure that you see everyone, that everyone has value, purpose, and meaning.
And I want to correct that. So it's social change is 1 million acts of kindness, but social justice is 1 million subversive acts of resistance.
Okay. That's good. I would say before you, because I always like to work inward then outward, and so another practical way that I would do this is just to just step back. And I've always been an avid journal. I've always journaled, and so I would just picture my heart as a building. And I tell my clients this too because they can really see the visual. So if your heart is a building and different rooms and different hallways and different levels indicate memories, moments of your life that were traumatic. You could go up to the 3rd floor, that was your childhood, the 16th floor, that was your 16th birthday. And then each room, you've stored something that, whether it was happy or whether that was painful. And before we can go out into the world and help, we have to first deal with the rooms that are hard. Go in that room where you've locked from your family and then just sit there. And if it's too much, close it and then have your friend come and help you, have a therapist come and help you. A lot of times we may just store things that we experience in these rooms and we just write it off. And then then the things may become overwhelming, burnout, and so those things spill out of the room, and it gets ugly when it spills out. And so that's when you just can't handle life because you're overwhelmed because the rooms that you have, that you've stored stuff in, hasn't really been managed well. And so it's just, so that's what I view therapy as, just finding someone to help go into your building, which is your heart, and just sort out some stuff that you've just suppressed.
Y'all,
And
my
then-
sister's smart.
Thank you for the imagery. I love that.
That's what I really had to do. Like, I really had to be like, okay, childhood, what trauma? Whether I didn't have the word for it then, but that was trauma, Brittany. Like, no, that was trauma. That wasn't your maturity. That was trauma that you had to adjust to at a different age, you know? And so I would say that first. And then once you've identified the rooms, then that's when you can say, okay, this needs to go there. Maybe I can start on this first, and I can close those doors and not deal with everything at one time.
Right.
Well, just to echo that,
And bringing in the title of the podcast. Okay. Our
Thank you.
panelists know what's up.
We didn't even tell them that. That's just on it.
I'm on it today. Okay. I mean, all this talk about fear, we can't not talk about safety, right? And I think what I tell my clients every time they walk into the room is this is a safe space. I want to give you something that maybe you have not been given. Maybe that was a need that was not met as a kid growing up. Maybe that's because you've been oppressed. Maybe that's because you're discriminating. All these people who live in the margins, right? That sense of safety and trust is huge. So even getting someone in through the door, to make that choice to come and sit in front of me, I really, really honor that so much so that I tell them that, right? And thank you for being here and wanting to work on yourself, unpack those rooms that maybe we've done such a good job of locking up. And this is a safe space, and I want to give you that felt safety. And I know that that is not something, that safety is freely given from me, but trust is something to be earned, right? So every time, whether that's 50 minutes, an hour, a week, when you come in and you're sharing a little bit of you to me, that is so, I mean, to witness that and then to see change and then have people be vulnerable and share with you things that they have literally locked up and kept from everyone and never had the space to share. That's that authenticity, that genuineness that I so honor my clients with, and that's so necessary, right? We need that soft landing to even be able to go through that. And then as we get through that, because now we have that safety, then we got to start challenging our clients, right? Okay. We got to start getting a little bit more comfortable with the uncomfortable. You know, we've laid some groundwork, some foundational stuff, and so now let's get into it. Because the thing that I do know about pain and trauma is there's no way around it. We try every way that we can.
Try
right?
to function.
Try to function,
Yeah.
whether that's, grabbing onto unhealthy relationships, whether that's grabbing onto drugs or alcohol because that numbs me and it's too painful otherwise, right? We do such a good job of walking around it or avoiding it, but the one thing I do know about pain and trauma and all those things is you have to get through it. Yeah.
Oh, question. Jack, can we get a mic?
Ooh, question.
Mic check,
One second.
1, 2,
All right.
1. Thank you.
We gotta go back to the word woke. I want to go back there.
This
Yes.
gentleman here. Yeah.
For sure.
How do you guys recommend going about telling your family and your friends that you're on an outrage vacation? You're full of,
Yeah.
because you're supposed to be outraged all the time, and they're sort of outraged that you're not outraged. Because I got to tell you, I'm doing something this weekend. Yes, I'll get upset about it whenever I read more, but right now I'm doing stuff for me. I mean, so what's a good way to go on an outrage vacation?
I love
I
that
like
idea.
that. I also
I'm
like
gonna
an
use
outrage
that.
vacation.
That's the title of his new book.
Right. We got wisdom
title
from
of
our
his new book,
panelists. We
right.
got wisdom from our audience.
Yes,
Listen,
man.
we all need to
We
meet
really
up
came
more
here for
often.
y'all.
This
That's
is-
really what it is.
I need one of those.
Right.
I mean, I guess that goes back to the balance of being able to shut off a little bit, right? Is you gotta, as much as we're talking and saying we need to act and as a collective, like be aware and do these things and make different actions and choices, we also need that inner work, right? And so that retreat, that time to go out is what you should be doing, right? To fill you up. Because I always tell my clients, like, do what feeds your soul. Do what feels good. That could be anything. That could be taking a hot shower. That could be maybe taking your shoes off and going on the grass. That's one of my favorites. Gardening. I mean, anything that you love and enjoy, we're exerting so much energy by being angry, right? It takes a lot of energy, a lot of time. There's a lot of gathering that happens when you do that, especially when you're with like-minded people, right? So it's a lot of energy that you're outputting, so you need to be filling your gas tank back up. Because we don't go very far when our gas tank is running on empty, right? That's what I call survival mode.
Yeah.
We're not really living, we're not really thriving, we're not learning, right? How do we get from the survival mode to then the living, right? Is we need that timeouts, we need those breaks.
And-
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm sorry, I want to ask, I kind of want to piggyback on that question, and I see that we have another question, but I want to piggyback on that question with I get that. So now if I'm him, how do I deal with them not accepting that I'm on an outrage vacation?
That has nothing to do with you.
Oh, okay, great. Good talk then.
Boundaries.
And we're done.
That's a boundary that you have to set.
Yes.
That you have to
Come on,
set, and then
boundaries,
you
yeah.
have to honor that.
Yeah.
Honor your boundaries. I honor mine, and it's uncomfortable for others, but I know what I need to do so I can be fueled and I can be fed and I can be whole, and I have to just honor that and let it be.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not sustainable to have that outrage all the
Yeah.
time. You have to have time to breathe in and breathe out. And so if you can kind of think of when I'm doing my activism, that's kind of breathing in, but I have to take time to breathe. I mean, that's breathing out. I have to take that time to breathe in and take care of myself because I can't survive if I'm always just breathing out. And so it's important to think of that self-care as the breath in. You know.
And if I can just quickly, I know we have to move to the question, but I would also just like to know that a lot of times, especially those people that don't want to let you have a break, some of us use outrage as entertainment. Some of us like get on the Twitter or the Facebook and like, oh, I'm bored, so let me spend the next 25 minutes being really
Being
mad
outraged,
at,
yes.
insert whoever I choose to be mad at, whoever is my enemy, and
It
sometimes you
relieves
gotta,
them so
you just gotta tell them like, I know that's how you, and sometimes people, that's how they relax, right? I know that's how you're using your
They're relaxed.
but I have a way I need to use
Yeah.
my time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Boundaries
think-
are where you stop and someone starts. Like boundaries are set to protect you, and so emotionally we should
Yeah.
set that
Yeah.
as far as we do it physically and financially
Right.
and time wise and all that stuff.
And I think that the counterbalance to activism is cultivating joy. And so you have to have that place where you can feed yourself and you're not always feeding,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think it was Brene Brown who also said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, she said you can't have compassion without boundaries.
Right.
And so there is such thing as compassion fatigue.
Yes.
We burn out,
Yes.
right? It's that empty gas tank again. We're not going to get very far. And so to give yourself that break, despite maybe people not understanding that, maybe you're that person for them to teach and to maybe learn from that, yeah, these breaks are healthy and these are good and this is what sustains me. I mean, you could be a really great example of that in your group.
Okay, so my question is, well, quick comment on that. I think too, sometimes avoiding negativity in general, like unless it's in the space of, trying to address, negativity, but saying, okay, I don't want to deal with your attitude today. Some people just have an attitude in life. But yeah, I definitely believe in self-care. So I think my question to you guys, because Brittany was saying something about talking to a therapist or a friend.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of friends who are struggling with issues of all kinds, right? And so I always say, well, I think you should maybe find a therapist. Like if you have the money or you have the resources to do that, I think you should do that. And there's so many biases around it. I'm pretty sure I'm not saying it correctly in that. So one of the questions is, how do you do that? But also even just suggesting to them that they reach out to their community, right? If you can't afford a therapist or you just don't believe in therapy for whatever your reason, being able to say, okay, I'm going to choose this friend, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to tell everybody your baggage or business sometimes, and that's fine. But I'm going to choose this person to really confide in. And, I have a billion people, thankfully, because I just live in that kind of world. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm part of the LGBT community. It's just so many different layers. So I have so many people to confide in. But, everybody doesn't, or everybody doesn't feel comfortable. So how do you address those people and kind of say it in a nice way, but also, make sure it's firm enough to them understand, like, this can lead to self-harm or, you know what I mean? In any way, just your body can also just shut down from stress,
Exactly. I would say, so if you had a friend and he or she was physically hurt, would you say, oh, don't go to the doctor, we could heal you, like we could do that? Oh, that bone is broken? Okay, let's just go ahead and like that self-medicate you until it's fixed. But then you could be doing that and then you could be causing more harm. You could be just really just in a bad boat years down. So that's how I kind of tell friends that I have also, like, therapy is just like going to the doctor, but it's your heart that you're healing. It's like emotional wounds that you're doing versus physical doctor. I don't know why we put so much emphasis on physical health and not emotional health. And it's like, you could be fine on the outside, but emotionally you're hurt. Emotionally, there's some things that have not healed, and if they have healed, there's kind of been some bruises too, so it hasn't healed well or healthy. And so I think when they get that, like, oh, okay, you're kind of right. I'm like, yeah. Then they could be more open to it. Well, not like, yeah, like that, like I'm right. No. But they're like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. That's what I meant, you guys.
And I think that there's also cultural biases in every subculture about going to therapy. And I think it's important that you're able to look at those and be able to talk about them with your friends as if they're resistant to therapy. You know, I think as for instance, as a gay man, going into a therapist would, I don't know, because we don't have that intergenerational thing going on, we have the shame or the fear of our physical and emotional safety, going and walking into a room and sharing something with someone that we don't know whether or not they're going to be able to be non-judgmental, be supportive, be encouraging, hold that space for us. And I think it's different with other cultures. I think I know, you know, many of the Asian cultures have a very strong bias against going to talk to someone, to a therapist, because it goes completely against their culture. Y'all wanna?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll speak about that for sure. I mean, it comes up. I mean, I was just Jasmine's here. She's from Lifeology, and she just put on a great panel called Side by Side. And
I'm so sad I missed that too, but I was checking it out.
It was such a great discussion. It was, you know, really removing that stigma from Black community, but really all marginalized communities, and being able to talk about that. And something that I shared then was having dinner with my parents and simply just now wanting to have those dialogues with them, right? Now that they see me not as a child anymore, we can actually sit down at the dinner table and talk about really important things. And one of the things I asked them was, you know, what do you guys think about mental health? You know, and they were like, oh no, you don't talk to anyone, right? You keep it at home, you keep it private. If it gets out of hand, you go to church, you pray it away, you invite the pastor. I mean, you contain it. And so the fear is, I can't get this out. So to be able to go to someone who might not even be Asian, right? Maybe it's someone that is someone who looks like could have been your oppressor. I don't know. There's a lot of triggers and a lot of mistrust in that. And so to be able to share in that again is really I don't know. I'm thinking it's precious, it's fragile to be able to do that. And my parents were just like, you know, you really taught us. You taught us about mental health, because our community is not talking about it. Our church definitely isn't talking about it. And so, and just my personal story, and kind of goes back to your question, is if you have any personal experience that you can share with that person, that's the way to tie them in, right? That's when it's a rise for you to be vulnerable and say, I've been through my struggle. And it hurts me to see you struggle. Let me help you struggling. Like, let's struggle together, right? Let me connect you to the people that I trust, and really kind of help carry that wound to someone who's trustworthy. Because you got to do it. And my personal story in that is I became a counselor because I had to go through my own counseling. Shocker, right? I had to do my own work. And my parents saw me through that struggle. They saw me out of that struggle. And then now to see that I've really started this career in helping other people, they're like, you taught us what that means, because that's how much is not being talked about in those communities. Or if it is, it's private conversations that you're never able to bring up again. And then that builds another wall of mistrust of how do I then help this person? Right. So it's really, it starts with you. It starts with you trying to make that change and say, hey, this is someone I know that is really, effective or competent in this field. I know this person, or I've seen and met this person. Let me just give this to you because I think that this person could really help you. And making those connections, I think, could be really helpful. Yeah.
And go ahead.
And then like,
okay,
validating the mistrust too, because especially in the Black community, like there has been some unethical experiments that have gone on within the Black community, like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. That, I mean, I understand the mistrust with coming into this field, like knowing that this has happened before and knowing like how can I trust you to hold something that, you know, in the past that psychology has really been based on just, I mean, older white men that only did studies within other white people and then mistreating marginalized groups too. And so just like that community of lack of distrust, I mean, mistrust, validating that. And then with like the faith component, I can also see that too. It's like, you know, I'm not like only talk to pastors and stuff, but I mean, God, he's placed people in different positions. And so he's placed doctors to handle people in there, like nurses.
Right.
And so it's like, you know, he's equipped us all with gifts. And so maybe that person's gift is to help you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And
And I
so,
would, on that
yeah.
same note, I would, as you were talking, I was really thinking about like, for the queer community, for a long time, you went to a psychologist to be pathologized.
yes.
Like literally, like in
Yes.
the DSM.
In the
like
DSM.
this is a
Yes.
disease.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think exactly what you were saying,
Yes.
validating that, like, hey, listen, I get it, I understand. I was scared too. And I think also, oftentimes, you know, you see this diverse panelist, a group of people we have here, a lot of times encouraging people to see a therapist that shares their culture or just that has experienced the things
Is
that they don't
culturally
like.
aware.
Culturally aware.
There was a point in
Culturally
time
educated.
where, like, when I was looking, like, specifically to see a therapist to talk about, like, romantic and sexual issues, so I sought out a queer therapist because,
Yeah.
like, A,
Yeah.
duh. But B, like, it really, you don't have that same, there's a level of fear that you just don't have when you don't have to think about, like, oh, is this person going
Judging
to, like,
you for
Yeah.
are they
whatever.
going to judge me? Are they
Yeah.
going to understand it? Are they
Judge.
going to, et cetera, et cetera?
And I really quick, because I want to get to Arlisha's question, but there is a documentary that a friend of mine, Darnell Lamont Walker is his name, and we'll put that in the episode notes, but he did a documentary called Outside the House. And it's about what you were talking about. He's talking specifically about the Black community, but how people the phrase is, no, you keep that, you don't take family business outside the house, is that thought process. And so he did a documentary on that where he went around and talked to a lot of different people where he was asking, like, where does this come from and what can we do to kind of break that cycle. So if you want to check that out, again, it's called Outside the House Doc, I think is what it is, online, .com. But again, we'll put it in the episode notes and on the website. Arlisha?
So I just wanted to give some feedback on everything that you guys said because you did bring up something that I was going to mention. I did do my research paper in grad school on the stigmatization of mental health in the African American community. And yes, in the African American community, that thought of going to therapy, it is based off of stemming from the Tuskegee experiment, but also as a social worker working in the community, I've learned that some Black people are not provided with the information that others are when it comes to mental health. So my question to you guys as therapists are you providing that information that, society feels like only upper middle class white people are getting versus, the people in the community that cannot afford to come to you in therapy? Are you giving them that same information in a manner that it is affordable, they can go and seek it? Because that information is not being provided to everybody to actually sit and take those necessary steps to get over that trauma that they've experienced. So we do have to think about, where are you getting your information from? Is this the correct information? Is this the updated information? Do you know that there's a DSM-5 now instead of a DSM-4? Everybody's not receiving that. So we as mental health providers, we need to make sure that we're not just outcasting people in the community that don't have the insurance or the money to pay for you. They deserve that information just as much as those people that are coming in and paying $75 to $100 per session.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So I want to address that, address her question, and we're going to take a quick break, and I'll kind of give you a little heads up on what that break looks like. So before we do that, can you address her question about like how, or perhaps also just saying like where can they find that information, right? So if they're not coming to you because they are mistrusting
Right.
The field itself, where can they get this information that she's talking about? Because you said letters and numbers that I don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
So what is it, and where can you find that?
Well, I think as a therapist, I think it's our responsibility to have resources outside of just us, and that we can pass those on. And I get calls every week about people that may want to come in, and we may not be the best fit, or too far away, or for whatever reason, or they want to use their insurance. And so I think it's my responsibility to have a referral list in my office that I can say, I can't help you, or this isn't going to work here, but try these 5 people, or go, these agencies will see you for sliding scale or for nothing, for free if you need help. I think that it's just kind of an injustice for us to think that, if they're calling us, we can't help them, that we can just say, goodbye.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I was really going to say the same thing, right? It definitely is our responsibility. We're there to help. So when we get that call, and if I'm not able to be the one to help you, I'm going to try my best to connect you with someone else to really get that help that you need. But it's also the person's responsibility to, I think, interview your counselor. It might not be a good fit. You might walk in and have one thought and then walk out with another too, and that's okay. So really being mindful of who you're choosing to be this helper but also influencer in your life through your struggle, I think is so important. And I know for me personally, that was absolutely the case, right? I was looking for an Asian American, and I wanted her to be a very specific kind of therapist, because I was also learning how to become one too. And so those are just things that I looked for, because it's kind of like what you were saying, Chris, is if I find that person that looks like me, then maybe there isn't so much I need to explain. There's just kind of like that acceptance that belongs there immediately, and a mutual understanding. So I would say definitely interview the person you're receiving the help from. I think that's smart, especially when you're trying to deal with that mistrust that you already have and experience, feel. I mean, interview and really scope out to see who is best for you. That's that responsibility for yourself, yeah.
I would say the first couple of sessions, I ask my clients, so what do you know? I want to know what have they gathered from the knowledge, from their friends, from the world about depression. Okay, so what is that? Tell me in your words what it is. And if it's something that's okay, that's a myth, or that's not really accurate, then that's when I do the psycho education. That's when I just tell them, okay, so this is what depression is. It's just not you just moping around. It's actually something that it's rather normal. A lot of people experience it. It's just much more than just you being sad today. It's and so I go through that, and I do it slowly, and I say it not in a I'm this and you're small. It's just a conversation that I say, and it starts to slowly unravel the myths that they've ingrained or that they've wired in their head. And then that's how it's normalized, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. And then I think the stigma comes off of it too, when I just start to just ask them what they already know, and then just tell them little bits and pieces of this is what it actually is, and this is why, you may be experiencing that.
So when we come back, I want to take about a 15-minute break, give you guys a chance to go to the restroom and get some yummy snacks. When we come back, I definitely want to talk about triggers. I want to talk about PTSD, and I think I sent you guys some stuff on PTSS that was talked about, or that was brought up there. I'm trying to talk about a lot of things that people have been communicating with us through the website and on our social media page. So I want to make sure that we honor those questions that are coming in. And I also want to talk about signs that we can look for. Are there things that maybe we don't recognize because we just do this every day? Are there signs that we can look for, that we can feel, or something like that. So while you are, like I said, taking a break, first, before we take a break, I want to make sure that I give a shout out to our sponsors, because our sponsors are the best. The Commish radio show, Ed Gray the Commish, which he may or may not be related to two of the people that are here. Don't know. But you can catch the Commish radio show on the Fishbowl Network. Also the Pottities Network, as well as Ebony Essentials by Ebony. And these delicious, these cupcakes, you guys, if you haven't had a cupcake, you are losing at life, and I want you to win. So I want you to go get a cupcake right now. These are so good. So take a minute, take 15 minutes, and we'll come back. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm being waved at. Also, raffle tickets. We are selling raffle tickets. So see my lovely friend who's sporting her new ring that she doesn't want me to tell anybody about, but she's engaged. But go see my lovely friend Nicole in the back. We are selling raffle tickets. It is $2 for one, $5 for three. Great. She is telling me it's my thing, and she's telling me all this stuff. There are some, right, that's teamwork makes the dream work, man. Great prizes from our donors. We have lipstick with Lip Lock by Janelle, because I'm Janelle and I like lip scents. So again, I showed you the lip gloss. For those of you who missed it, the lipstick doesn't come off. I always did. She gets really scared, but it really doesn't come off. So it's definitely worth it. I've been wearing it all day. It just kills you every time. So you've got that. We've also got a class for 20. It's called Flirty Girl Fitness. It's a class for 20 people. She'll come to you. We also have movement classes. She is offering 10 free classes, which is great. That's yoga, meditation. If you feel like you want to karate chop something, I don't know. She also offers karate there as well. Do whatever you got to do to get yourself together. Also, vegan meals. She gave 3 different meals for you, and it was mac and cheese. And so y'all might not get it. But make sure that you guys go ahead and get raffle tickets, take a break.
It was 2 meals, right? Janelle? I heard it was
Oh, it was two? It was 2?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
no,
it was 2 meals. It wasn't 3. It wasn't 3. So get your raffle tickets from Nicole, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes. If you need extra restrooms, there are also additional restrooms in the main building and Water Tower Theater. really quick, I wanted to make just a quick announcement. We're still on break. That's not working. I could, oh. I was going to say, look, I do curtains. I can yell. I got it. No, please don't. Thank you. Okay. No? Really quick, I wanted to make a quick announcement. We're still on a break, but I just wanted to make sure that I let you know that there are little cards back at that back table if you wanted to write questions that you don't want to ask. Nicole will be happy to take that question and we'll ask it, so it doesn't have to have your name on it or anything like that. We'll take that. Also, we had a surprise donor, so if you haven't gotten your raffle tickets, you probably should, because there is a surprise donor. Denise Lee on stage is doing a cabaret show, and I think she may have a fan or two in here, but she is donating 2 tickets to that, and the show is on next Tuesday, the 19th. Just over here at Water Tower Theater, so it's over here. So you also, my bad, homie, my bad. I don't want to get in trouble. At Addison Theater Center. Same building. Ooh, I got in trouble with the producer.
Yeah. Hello. Hey guys, we're gonna start again. All right. Y'all don't have to do a live audience cheering. That's okay. All right.
Great. So I'm hopeful that you guys got your life with the cupcakes. Like I said, I saw a lot of cupcakes are gone, so I'm happy that you are sustained. We've got a lot of actually questions that I feel like we could probably go on forever, but we're gonna try and get to some of the questions that we've, like I said, seen on Facebook. I'm gonna try and talk about some of these statistics from the survey as well. But before we get back into it, because I know all of you guys are fancy people with fancy social media accounts.
Yes. Okay. So everybody, you got a smartphone. Pull out your phone. Okay. Pull out your phone. Step one, if you have the Facebook app, we would love to have you check in. Let everybody know that you came. Oh, so did you already do it? See?
Listen.
Y'all are real ones.
Y'all
We
are right.
appreciate you.
MVPs, man.
No, but if you go really if you go like at the top of the thing, it'll say check in right there. I'm doing it literally right now. If you type in Addison Theater, it'll come up Addison Conference and Theater Center. And then it'll say attending. It'll ask you what you're attending. Just if you'll click Social Justice Burnout for us. And you can do a caption. I'm going to do just "It's lit" in all caps with several exclamation points.
But you don't have to tell your people that it's lit if it's not your thing.
Instead you just say something about how like we're having a really deep conversation, we're unpacking trauma, we're going through the rooms of our heart.
Yes.
We're opening some doors, we're leaving some more closed.
Right. We've figured out our lantern and our light. We've got a whole bunch of good gems
We
up
got
here.
lanterns, yes. I would also say if you're on Twitter, please follow us, especially Twitter, because like Twitter's low-key like my responsibility. So follow us on Twitter. Follow us.
He's trying to make sure he has a job.
Listen, for real. Follow us on Twitter at Echoes Media 1. And that way, you'll get updates, you'll get more reminders when when the show's coming out. And we're working on a project. This is also my responsibility. We're working on a project where we're going to tweet out some of the really great quotes so you can get your daily quotient of Echo's ideas. And then are we on Instagram?
We are on Instagram.
Yeah, what's the, Janelle, will you give them the Instagram handle? I don't do Instagram, y'all.
It's also Echoes Media.
Yes, on Instagram we are at Echoes Media 1. Forgive me, I never do Instagram because I don't like to take pictures. Like, if they would just let me just post, I just want to do words, but you have to go through a whole separate app.
Twitter,
Too much work. Yes, that's why I'm on Twitter, because it's just words.
All right, cool. So if you're all checked in, great. If not, ask a buddy, they can help you. And let's go. So I know that there are a couple of questions that I think we still have, and Nicole's gonna let me know. Cool, I'll call for it in a second. Actually, I'm just kidding, I'm calling for it now.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of questions up here that we kind of wanted to get to, but I know for a fact, thank you, baby, that you had it's okay, you all right. You said something about the word woke that you have problems with. So let's go ahead and get to that.
The word woke, I just do not like it because think about it, like literally, if you navigated through life being woke, being like awake the entire time, you would be exhausted, you would be drained, you would be physically, mentally not able to sustain yourself. So why do we have to be woke to triggers, to trauma? That's what narrative are we sending people? To be woke to trauma all the time.
Right.
And so at first I was like, yeah, woke. I'm just like mentally and like aware of everything. But then I'm like, wait, no, that's not sustainable over time. So that's all I wanted to say. I just don't like it.
on the subject of woke, right, there's a great James Baldwin quote that is like, to be a Negro and to be relatively conscious in America is to be in a rage almost all the time.
Yeah.
So imagine to be a Negro in America and constantly conscious and non-stop conscious, you probably just burn out.
Like,
People just,
we need to go to sleep. We need to go to sleep.
Sometimes you could take a nap.
Yes.
rest is real.
that vacation that you were talking about. That's where that comes in
Go to
handy.
sleep.
That outrage in vacation. So I want to talk about. Actually, I want to talk about signs first, if you don't mind. What are some signs that we are either burned out or in the process of burning out? What are some signs?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You go.
It's like vocal double dutch right now.
I was gonna say maybe even just I'm thinking about like basic needs, right? Basic needs that we have, which is we need to stay hydrated, we need food, we need sleep. When any of those basic functions are hard to do, your body and your brain is all out of whack, right? I mean, we know the concept of hangry, right? We're angry, we're mean when we're not getting the things that we need. And so when those things are a struggle, I would say those are one of the first signs that to be aware of is my daily sleep is getting interrupted, maybe I'm having nightmares, maybe I'm getting triggers, maybe the dark isn't safe for me anymore to sleep at night. So any of those things, really just the basic functions is a good place to start, yeah.
And I would add also if your ability to be compassionate and have empathy is going out the window, it's time to take a break. Because if you can't hold space for these people that you're working with, or people that are different than you, that you're maybe have different ideologically, if you're not taking that, as I was talking earlier, taking that breath in, you can't do that if you're only blowing it out. You need to be able to take a break. And, I was thinking about, a friend of mine was telling me a story about in band, when they have a long, if they have a long note that they have to play for, a super long time, they may not be able to hold that note for the whole time. So they have to talk to their team or their other trumpet players and say, I'm going to do it this long, you're going to do it this long, then I'll come back. So in some ways, self-care is kind of that same way. You've got to be able to have people that you can connect with that support you in taking breaks in your self-care.
Leaning on other people is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Understanding
Yeah.
that if you stop fighting today, somebody is still fighting.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You're not gonna, it's not, the mantle won't fall.
You're not like
And
the
it's not
hero.
sustainable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And to feel, I think also when you don't, like there's clients that come in who either one, don't feel connected to themselves, right? Really missing that inner world relationship with themselves, or when they're not feeling connected to other people. And we know that those are absolutely basic needs for us as well, right? We need community. We also need to feel connected to our authentic self. And so really helping people get to that place where they can and willing to talk about some of those things that maybe gotten so in a way, it got in the way for them to really feel connected to others and themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Going, still talking about triggers. So emotionally, you could be irritable. You could have like a short fuse. You could be more sad, just lethargic, or behaviorally, you could isolate yourself, and then thoughts could just be like, oh, I'm just exhausted, or I'm tired, or I'm of no help. And so I think if you think of triggers in those three categories, that's what I look for too. And then also just if those triggers become so overwhelmed, then that's how you can be numb to it. And then that's completely burnt out, is when you're just completely numb to it, because that's when you've detached yourself from feeling, from people, and then your thoughts have just gone.
Yeah. Almost like dissociating,
Yes,
right?
dissociate.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think we've all gotten numb to a lot of things that go on, just because it happens so often.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, another shooting. Okay, that's horrible to say. Oh, another shooting. That's not. I don't like that.
Yeah.
But and it's not a normal response too, because normally we are built to feel, because if we didn't feel, we would be in danger all the time. If you put your hand over a fire and if you say, oh, this doesn't feel, like I don't feel it, that's a warning sign, like something's going on where you
Right.
can't feel that. And so the moment that we start to not feel, I think that's when like, oh, okay, back
Yeah.
up.
Right.
Let me think of my thoughts. Let me think of my emotions. Let me think of my behavior. What is going on?
Yeah.
Well, and on that subject, I have often found myself, scrolling, whatever, and you can see, oh, there's something that we all need to be upset about. And how do we find that balance? Is there a healthy way for us to say, I know the response it's almost like, can you have the response in a truthful way without immediately engaging? And like, where's that balance of, this is something that I want to have the capacity to really
But
feel
I don't
it.
have it right now.
Right.
That's okay to say that. I don't have I don't have it in me right now to feel that. And maybe later when I'm in a better space, I could process that. Like, man, like when you recently texted me about the New Zealand shooting case, I was at work and I was like, I can't look at that
right
yet. When I'm in a space where I can, that's going back to boundaries. That's just my boundary. Like, I have to protect my emotional health, my intellectual boundary, and I just have to do that.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
Because she is the one who told me the boundaries thing, and I'm learning. I always say I'm a psychologist, or like I'm a therapist because my sister is one. So I have all the answers. I don't really think that's how it works, but we're gonna call it that. Just like I have my MD because I watch Grey's Anatomy. That's how it works.
How many clinical hours does that count as? Having a sister?
Relational hours.
Look, we can make it work.
Election hours, yes.
But yeah, those boundaries are super, super important. And it's so, I think it's so helpful to, I think you just don't realize that you need them. You don't realize when you actually take them, you don't know. I think what helped me is when I knew that I was calling them boundaries. Like, this is what it is. Like, I'm a big fan of calling a thing. Whatever that thing is, call that thing whatever it is. And so I think once I learned to call this, like, I am setting a boundary, it also helped me to adhere to that boundary a lot more, because I know that that's what it is. I know it's in place for a reason, and I know that this is meant to protect me.
Yes. And I think also with boundaries, many times we think about that as what's okay and what's not okay with another person. Well, we also have to practice boundaries. What's okay and what's not okay for me. And if I start getting too overwhelmed looking at this, hours and hours of Facebook or Twitter or whatever, I need to be mindful enough to go, ooh, I'm not practicing self-care for myself. And this is not okay. I need to take a break.
Which I also want to bring up. So one of the questions on our survey, it said, let me go back. Just kidding. See, I said I was prepared. I wasn't prepared. I was just kidding.
Okay, but just briefly there
Yeah,
on
go-
that
do your
subject, that was like kind of just a revelation to me right there. Like, you need to set boundaries. You need to set boundaries for yourself, for like how you interact with yourself.
Yeah.
And I literally have never thought about that.
It's internal as much as it is
Absolutely.
external. Yeah.
So the question that I was saying was, what is your reaction when you hear about a new incident of social justice? That's racism, police brutality, hate crimes. And it looks like 58% of the people who took the survey said they go down the rabbit hole. They just click and click and click and click and click and click and click. Some people catch the headlines, and some people ignored it. I think 39% said that they catch the headlines, and only about 3% said they ignore it. So here's my question to you guys about that in particular. It's kind of twofold, right? So I am not a go down the rabbit hole kind of person, because I just don't have that kind of time sometimes. I just don't have that kind of time. But at the same time, the reason I do not like catching the headlines is because clickbait is real. And people publish things incorrectly all the time. People, just give misinformation. Like, the whole story is not even about that, but you get caught on those headlines. So how do I navigate that, right? Because I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, although most of us do.
Yeah.
Because my thought is let me read what it says before I just repost this. I'm not going to be the person who's going to repost it and this be something that happened in 2006, and now I've inflamed a whole bunch of people on a Tuesday that didn't need to be inflamed about nothing that happened. You know what I mean? So I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to just catch the headlines and not really know what's happening. So how do we navigate that? Sorry, I threw that at y'all.
No, it's like you want to be aware, because it's kind of like your responsibility to know what's going on. And so you may feel like, if I don't know all what's going on, just make you feel like you should know a lot.
Right.
And so,
And you can't do anything if you don't know what's going
right.
on.
Right. And is it based on data, or is it
Right.
based on a highly emotional reaction?
Yeah.
You know, so if it's not based on data, then it's, well, Brene Brown calls it bullshit. So,
We can say that on here.
yeah,
It's totally fine.
so if someone is, or if you're reading something and it's just emotional based and it's not fact based, that's not data. That's not real. It's just it's a story that someone has made up for themselves. And so when you're looking at that stuff, if it's not data based, then you really need to be careful about reposting, or, you know, you see that it doesn't have sources, and, you know, let it go. You know, that's not where you need to spend your time.
There's a question in the back.
So sometimes the pain, and I think the pain and the trauma that we experience can sometimes be self-induced. A lot of times by taking on too much of a workload, or not engaging in activities that are areas of our strengths. If we approach the issue if we approach the issue of social justice as a project, and we understand that there are certain requirements that need to be considered in terms of conditions established before embarking on that journey, to anyone on the panel, can you speak to how managing expectations and understanding who you are, and you spoke a little bit about that, understanding who you are in terms of your core values, recognizing your strengths and your weaknesses, and how they can be used not only to decrease your probability of experiencing a burnout or a breakdown, but also to assist you in determining your role in the fight for social justice and how you might be most effective in that endeavor as well.
That's good. Yeah.
That was quite right. That was quite, yes. Okay. Well, panelists?
I think the keywords that stuck out to me was role and expectations. And so once you identify what your role is on this ongoing fight that didn't start with you, and that's not going to end with you, I think that's when you can put some realistic expectations on yourself. Because maybe since the social justice fight is so big and there's so many things that need to be addressed, I think just knowing what your role is and then putting realistic expectations on yourself, so that way you don't feel guilt or burnt out when you don't meet them. You don't feel like you have to do everything, because, you know, I'm going to stay in my lane. Like, I know that this is what I'm passionate about and this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to fight everything because I can't do it. You're going to be tired. Like, there's so many things. I get upset about so many things, but I'm like, wait, Brittany, find one thing that you're passionate about and just run with that. Because that's when you're going to be authentic. That's when you're going to be most efficient, when you just find that struggle that is going on that you just really identify with. Yeah.
Recognizing our limitations, that we can't fix everything. And many times the person that we are with doesn't need to be fixed. They just need to have someone hold space for them. And for you to be, I guess as a clinician, for me to recognize that I can't, I just thought of a story back when I was in grad school, in the olden days. And I was working, it was back in the late 80s, and I was doing HIV/AIDS counseling. And my supervisor back then we had to use cassette tapes for our sessions to give, to get graded. And she gave me a piece of paper that said, I think you're you're trying too hard. And she said, if you want to be Jesus, you're going to have to wear a crown of thorns. And I still have that piece of paper today. And it reminds me that my job is not to fix, it's to be there and to hold space for these people.
Yeah.
There's a question, Jack.
It's not a question, but a response on how do you, it can be overwhelming all these things that are going on. And what I've done for myself is contribute to those organizations where there's structures in place. So that way I can take a break and know that things are still going on and I'm doing something to support those efforts, you know, without stressing as much.
Yeah.
So
That's actually really good. I didn't even think about that, but when that kind of goes in line with what you were saying with checking in. I don't remember who was saying it, but checking in with your friends, like, or knowing that, like, it was you. You were saying something about the holding notes. That is one of those. That is the perfect way to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take this breather. You hold that note for me, and keep going. That's a perfect. I never even considered that, but that's a perfect way to do that.
Yeah, I was listening to something recently. I can't pick where it came from, but it was super insightful. It was whenever it was something like his mom was passing him down some advice, and he said, whenever there's a problem or there's something wrong going on, look to the helpers who are helping. And that really stuck with me because I was like, yeah, you're right. Like there's so many different helpers around making some small difference, right? Like I think the overwhelming feeling is, oh my gosh, this is such a big crisis. Oh my gosh, this needs so much. It needs a lot of attention, a lot of time. Yes, it's a call to action, but it's also going back to that trust thing is, and Brene Brown explains this really well with like the trust jar, right? Is it's not a big, huge like performance that gains and earns the trust, right? It's actually really small little things. So even if it's you being in a position of helper, it's how can I help my person next to me, right? Which is a lot more attainable, reachable than maybe it is how do I like reach this whole mass of people. And so it really starts in your own community, right? And using yourself as a tool of I have a voice and I'm gonna use it and I'm gonna use it to help other people too.
So I'm going to give the panelists some homework. I'm going to actually give you, and by homework I mean like right here in this minute.
Okay.
So I'm going to have like one of you take just a brief break. I want you to find a question that you think that we have, because we had a long list of questions that I know we're not going to get a chance to get to. But we had a long list of questions, and I know that they each had some things that they would like to answer. So Anna, if you can find a question, and then while you're looking for that question, I'm going to ask this question to the other two of you. This was a question that was given to us in the question jar. What advice would you give to someone who keeps experiencing trauma, failed relationships, loss of loved ones, and feelings of helplessness in times like this? So to me, it feels like it's when I read that, I'm thinking this person feels overwhelmed.
Right.
This person, to me, that sounds like burnout based on some of the things that you guys have already talked about. So what advice would you give this person who wrote this question?
Let's see.
I think the most obvious one would be to find a clinician that you can work with to help understand if these things are happening, you know, back to back, that could be trauma. But if you're repeating the same thing over and over, you need to look at what you're doing, what your part may be. You may have some blind spots, you know, and you also need to have someone that can hold that space for you and be with you and say, gosh, that's really hard what you're experiencing, and maybe they can give you some skills or things for you to think about that might help you change the future and not let your past be what defines you.
And I would definitely say just for them to step back. It seems like there's like a pattern. There's a lot that they're experiencing. I'm all about being gentle, and so this seems like it's a lot going on. And it's like if they were in a pool, they're drowning right now, and it's almost as if I cannot come out because failed relationships, loss of a loved one. It's just I keep sinking. Offer your hand up, and hopefully there's someone that can help them take the load off of it. I would say step away and then just like figure out what room should I tackle first. Don't tackle it all. What room can I handle?
Those are all different traumas
Right.
that are happening, stacking on top of each other.
That definitely require its own time to deal with, but don't do it all at once. That's not healthy.
What was the question that you wanted to talk about?
My question was, how much should we tell children?
Okay.
How much should we
I was
tell
so
children?
interested to hear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Am I answering the question too?
Yes, go ahead. How much should we tell? The question is, how much should we tell children?
Let's see. Okay, so last night I was doing some homework in my group practice Lifeology OC. Let me plug them in. Oak Cliff. We've been talking about this documentary that came out. It's called "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" And it was about Mr. Rogers. It's on HBO. If you haven't seen it, I really encourage it. And man, this was back in like the 50s, 60s, right? When he was just so radical and revolution in the way that he spoke to children and teaching them, and then not that the set happened in a bubble, right? There was so much going on. I mean, civil rights, everything was happening during those times. And he really made it a focus of let's not forget about the children. Let's not forget about the kids in all this, because just because they're little, they experience those big emotions, those big losses, just the same as adults and parents do. So having those trusting people who are aware, who know what's going on, but then there's that thing about boundaries too, because they are kids, and there is a level of protection that we need to provide them too, and ultimately letting them know that I'm a caretaker in your life, I'm a trustworthy person, and I'm gonna protect you as best as I can in this, and you're safe in this. But there's also telling them, like filtering out almost, how much of this am I going to decide to tell my child? What's the real message, I guess, in all of this that I'm trying to pass and teach on? And I feel like we've gotten so far away from teaching our kids. When you talk about discipline, I tell my parents this all the time, when you talk about discipline, the root word of that is to teach. But we've gotten totally on the opposite of that, of when you make mistakes, you're gonna get in trouble. It's turned into punishment and just the shame that breeds from raising our children like that. So raising them in the light, right, to let them be aware of what's going on, but also maybe there's another call of action there too. Like there is something that we can do in our communities, right? Like whether that's gathering with your church, whether that's, meeting people outside of your group, your bubble. I mean, I think that's what we have to do. We got to educate them. And if we want this diverse, if we want this peaceful world, right, we got to teach them what that even looks like. And that starts with just relationship, being kind. Man, we've got to teach our kids how to be kind, how to deal with the unkindness too, right? And so how much should we tell our children? I mean, it's going to differ on everyone, but something that I just have such a heart for is when children experience loss, it is just as big, if not maybe sometimes bigger, than the adult who is coming in his 60s, 50s of holding and carrying that pain with him for a long time. Right? So addressing that, calling it, give it a name. These are the feelings. Yes, you should be feeling this. Yes, of course, that's normal. And we can't numb it, because numbing is not selective, right? We can't just numb all the painful parts. We also numb the joy and the goodness that feelings give us too. So giving them that space, calling it, right? Saying it's okay that you're angry, and it's okay that if you feel this hate, because that could be a very righteous hate, right? Because we're not okay. It's not okay with some of the things that are happening. So, just such a responsibility to be raising our kids and really knowing and not be afraid to. Yeah.
So another question that I have is just about PTSD. Would you say that what we're suffering is PTSD in terms of a community, in terms of seeing slights against, not even slights, just like hate crimes against LGBTQ, against Muslim Americans and the religion, and especially with immigration that's happening right now? I think, unfortunately, that look, like the look of immigrant or what have you is different. And so would you say that people who constantly walk around in that fear are suffering post-traumatic stress syndrome or
Disorder?
did I say it?
Yes. Post-traumatic
Disorder, that's what it was. Because I was like, that is not a D. But yeah, would you say that, like, as a community and as the people who are in these marginalized communities?
Well, one of the diagnostic criteria for PTSD is hypervigilance. And so if you're walking around in a state of hypervigilance all the time, that's one of the diagnostic criteria. It's not the only one, but having flashbacks or having nightmares or having inability to, you can probably name them better than I can, but having invasive thoughts, having startle responses, all of those kind of things are symptoms of PTSD. You know, if you want to get an official diagnosis, you have to have so many on the list.
Okay.
But I think as a community, we do experience these things. You know, walking outside, if you walk outside your door and you're afraid somebody may shoot you, or you're afraid it's not going to be safe, you know, that is a state of hypervigilance that is so unfortunate that we have to experience. But it's something that's very real, you know.
And on that subject, would it be fair to say that even if we are not necessarily, not all of us, I think, have PTSD, but would it be fair to say that some of the tools that you all have learned to treat things like PTSD, or some of the concepts that have been developed to understand what that is, might be useful for those of us that are just experiencing maybe less acute traumas, but that sort of, like we've been talking about, that more spread out trauma.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And I don't think that the world is PTSD.
Right.
I think that we all do carry these symptoms and this baggage, this stuff that unless we are able to, you know, constantly unpack it and process it, that we're going to be walking around with some of it. Yeah.
I want to be mindful of our time because I want to give you guys prizes. So I want to be mindful of that time, but I also want to make sure that we address some of the things. So your homework, grab your question. Okay. I want to point to you as well because you brought up two things on the break. You mentioned the question, why now? Like, why are we talking about it now? Can you talk a little bit about?
Yes. So, of course, I've been preaching Brene Brown all day, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. But in her book, Braving the Wilderness, this is about, she's using a lot of her concepts of vulnerability, authenticity, and courage. And she uses it in a context of dealing with people who are different than us. Especially, we've got this fractured ideology and this, you're either with us or against us. There's no middle ground. And so she has a quote in here in her book by Bill Bishop, and he wrote a book called The Big Sort. And I'm just gonna well, before I read that, I'm gonna tell you a statistic. In the 70s, 25%, less than 25% of Americans lived in places where the presidential election was a landslide. In other words, we lived next door and attended schools and worshiped with people who held different beliefs than us. We were ideologically diverse. So in 1980, or in the last election, 80% of communities, it was a landslide for one candidate or the other. So what we've learned to do is we just stay inside our bubble, our tribe. And as a result of that, I think that it's made it more difficult for us to have these conversations and reach across the table to people who believe things and think things differently than we are. And it's, anyway, I want to read this quote really quickly. As people seek out the social settings they prefer, as they choose the groups that make them feel most comfortable, the nation grows more politically segregated. And the benefit that ought to come with having a variety of opinions is lost to the righteousness. That is the special entitlement of homogeneous groups. We all live with the results, balkanized communities whose inhabitants find other Americans to be culturally incomprehensible, a growing intolerance for political differences that has made national consensus impossible, and politics so polarized that Congress is stymied and elections are no longer just contests over policies, but bitter choices between ways of life. So, and that was written in 16.
Right.
So you can have a newer book called The Bigger Sort, I think. You know.
Right. And just as a quick plug, if you are looking for places to have those conversations, you can go to Changing the right, because see, this is what we do here. Changing the Perceptions Community Conversations. We'll make sure that we link that in our on our page and in our episode notes as well. And that is by Change the Perception or Denise Lee, aka she also might be related to me, but that's not the point either. But so if you are looking for a place to have those conversations, you can do that as well there. Little sister, do you have
By the way,
Ms. Gray?
that's Janelle's mama for the podcast listeners that don't know. Just so y'all are aware.
Ms. Gray?
We've talked about a lot, and I don't want to just keep rehashing, so
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry if I didn't
no,
complete the homework.
no, that's okay. You don't get a 0 today.
See,
That's okay.
that's family. She gave an assignment and she was like, no, I don't.
She's like, wait, no.
I'm gonna return that assignment and you can have it back.
There's also one other thing that you talked about, the Taraji P. Henson
Yes.
clip, which I do want to put on the website as well, but I had sent that to you. And tell me why that stuck with you or why that was important for you to talk about.
Well, when we were talking earlier about safety, going to the biases or the fears about going to therapy, she speaks to this, and she's created a foundation to try and educate the African American community about therapy and about what it is and resources that are available. And so when y'all were talking about that, I thought
That was a good. What was the phrase that she used? It was something. What was the phrase? Culturally competent, which is about finding those people, like you said, finding those therapists who are culturally competent with what you are wanting to talk about. I feel like there's so much. If you don't mind picking a question or something that you think we haven't answered, and maybe just send that answer to me in an email, I'll be happy to share that on the website. Because I think that, like you said, some of those questions that we didn't get to would be very helpful. If anyone does have any questions as well that they would like to send, you can always, I always say that Echoes Media is about the conversation. It's about making sure that we talk to each other. This is not about Chris and I sitting up here on a podcast talking about our opinion. We very much welcome everybody. So if you have anything that you would like to share with us or a question that you would like to ask, you can always email us at echoes@echoesofthestruggle.com. That's echoes, ES, at echoesofthestruggle.com. You can also find our website, www.echoesofthestruggle.com as well.
I would also throw out that you can tweet us a question.
You can, listen.
At Echoes Media 1.
Yes, you can also
For real,
tweet us a question. Yes.
We'd love to.
We actually are quite interactive on the Facebooks and the Twitters, so feel free to do that. Let's go ahead and do. Look, I'm like you. I am not going to be able to give a leave or a takeaway. I'm just taking. I feel like I just have a big backpack of takeaways. Right. So I am actually perhaps going to leave it to our panelists, unless Chris, I'm going to graciously bow out of this leave and come. I have, because there's too much. I've got lanterns, I've got houses, I've got too much. I've got too many things to take away. So I want to. I'm sorry, Bill.
I actually do think I have
go for
a leave and takeaway. So my takeaway is going to be setting boundaries with yourself.
Yeah.
I have to have boundaries about how me treats me, how what I do to inform myself. And then I did want to leave something that we talked about earlier. We talked about going down the rabbit hole, right? And on that subject, I would just say, and I'm thinking again about that, the light and the lantern. When you're going down that rabbit hole, please remember why you are doing this. What is your purpose? And I want to give a quick example, which is, so I started reading about what happened in Christchurch. And, because I thought it was important to know. And I think that is following one of my guiding lights, right? But then it kind of got into, okay, there was a politician that said something unpopular about it. And I was like, okay, this is on the border. I guess I should know that. But am I voting in New Zealand elections? No, I am not. So how relevant is this to me? And then it got to a teenager who slammed an egg on top of the head of the politician, and they're calling him egg boy on Twitter, blah, 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 blah. But my point is, when you are, I think, again, a good boundary that I'm gonna start setting with myself is, when you're going down that rabbit hole, make sure you are sticking to your guiding lights. I don't wanna just know this random trivia just to know it. It has to be about like, how am I engaging with compassion and how am I engaging with care for myself and for others?
Right.
Because if you want to get trapped in, you know, and then this person said this about it, and that person said that about it, and the third person, and Australian politicians, and Chelsea Clinton, and like, okay, too much.
Right.
We can keep it, you can keep the main thing. You can keep focused on, if you, as you go down that rabbit hole, bring your lantern with you. It'll do you a lot of good.
Yeah.
That's a great example of what you just talked about, of the difference between data and
Right.
people creating stories
Yeah.
about, or, you know, stuff that we can get sidetracked with.
Yeah.
That's not about what happened.
What would your leave and takeaway be?
You know, I'm just really grateful that I get to be a part of this, you know.
And we are very grateful to have you here.
Yeah, it's been enlightening, and I just, you know, I just hope that we can continue to shine light on this kind of stuff and talk about it, and I guess that's my takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm super grateful for this opportunity. I thought it was such a good job on your end, Janelle, for picking us out and finding us to kind of be here, but also represent, right? And opening it up so that we're not like colonized, like we're not just in these little sections, but that we can actually have bigger conversations like this. I mean, going back to taking action, all that, like this was an act, right? It took a lot of work. It took a lot of getting together and talking about how we can prevent some of that burnout, doing things that fill our soul. This today filled my soul. You know what I mean? I get to walk away feeling empowered. I learned a lot. I learned just from hearing different stories. I love the interaction. I mean, you guys even showing up on a Saturday to be a part of this too. I mean, all of this there's so much goodness in this that I hope we just keep it going, right? Just have more of these experiences. Yeah, so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. I would say just my takeaway would just be how powerful this space is, and how powerful this work is that we do, and how being gentle is so important. It's just a continuum, continue being gentle with yourself as you're hearing about these things, as you're dealing with your own trauma, as you're also in the sessions with other people, because we're human too. And so I think sometimes our clients are like, oh, no, like I'm human, I feel too. So having to also just compartmentalize when it needs to be done, and then being gentle with yourself, and gentle with the stuff that you go through and what you take in. I'm big on boundaries, so I'm always with boundaries. Like, I have to limit what I feed my soul, because I don't want to grieve my heart. I don't want to just be heavy, but I don't have to carry everyone's burden. I wasn't built for that, and I don't think we were all built for that. The savior complex is what I think some counselors have. I mean, and I'm guilty of that too. Just like, oh, I want to save everyone. I can't save everyone, but I could help, and I can be an ally. I could support other people while also supporting my own needs too.
I would love to see us to be able to continue talking about maybe some more practical, on the ground ways to practice being civil when in the face of when we're dealing with social justice issues, and we're dealing with people that are different, and being able to, speak truth to bullshit, or but be civil, to learn how to reach across the aisles, and to be able to learn how to have those civil conversations. And when we don't agree, I think that would be, I would love to be a part of that. Yeah.
We will always try and make something happen. I am gonna call for my lovely assistant, Vanna, AKA Nicole. And we're gonna start giving away prizes. Before I do, we'll go ahead and close out this episode. Thank you so much for being here. This has been just so many things, all of the wonderful ones. And so I'm really appreciative that you came out, like she said, on a Saturday. So we'll go ahead and close this out. Create hope, forge a path, change the world. You want to do something? I'm going to go grab the prizes from the back.
Okay.
And I got it, Mimi. Yeah, I got it. And you, first of all, wait, hold on.
As,
Pay no attention to the person behind the curtain.
right, as you're paying no attention to the person behind the curtain, can we get a quick round of applause for our founder and host and producer over here who made everything possible, who really put this all together. And can we also get a shout out for our co-producer, Jack the Ghost. For those of you who don't know, this podcast is hosted on the Poddities Network. That's Jack's, like, there's a bunch of great podcasts that he puts together, that he, like, edits, and yeah, he's amazing. So sorry.
Okay, great, awesome. So I am gonna hand this to someone who's not me, so you don't think I'm cheating. This was handed to me by someone who was here and had to leave. I did not purchase a ticket. I don't want to be responsible. I'm sorry. You didn't do your homework.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
It was gonna come back. It was gonna come back.
Oh my gosh, this is trauma.
This is trauma. Okay, so we're definitely gonna do some prizes, like I said, some giveaways. So go ahead and pull out your raffles. Before we get started and everything, I also want to just give one more shout out to our sponsors, the Commish Radio Show, the Poddities Network, Essentials by Ebony, which she is the one who is responsible for our lovely cups that say Echoes Media.
Right?
And also V's. V's.
V's Bake Shop.
Thank you, because she's just V to me. Okay, so V's Bake Shop. So she has love, like I said, y'all got your life, right? With the cupcakes?
Right,
I
those
wasn't
cupcakes
wrong,
are so
right?
good.
Okay, so first number. Okay.